Hello again. We will continue our conversation on conflict management here. This will be the final outline, the final video on this particular subject. This is, again, based on Public Relations, Strategies and Tactics by Wilcox and Cameron, the 10th edition. Defensive versus accommodative strategies. And we were looking at some examples of each one of those in the previous outline and the previous video. Many times an organization starts out with a defensive strategy only to find that the situation demands corrective action or even an apology, which is an accommodative action. Now, variables tending to prevent adopting an accommodative strategy, we're going to talk about those in a moment. I thought I should maybe also provide you with a definition of the word accommodate, which means to provide with something that is desired or something that is needed. So when you are accommodating someone, you are basically giving them what they want, more or less. So what are the variables tending to prevent adopting an accommodative strategy? One is the management is convinced that the public and the outside world is wrong, that we're right, they're wrong. Two, contending publics want the organization to take sides on a policy issue. So who do you accommodate? If you accommodate one, you make the other unhappy. So that can be a problem, and these things can be quite complex. There are legal and regulatory constraints, potential liability. This really goes beyond the scope of this course. But one thing that public relations people understand is they have to work with the legal staff of an organization, and they will be told, public relations people will be told, we cannot admit blame here publicly, because the legal ramifications and potentially the damages involved are too great. So we have to maintain our innocence, at least publicly, as we go to court. If this goes to court, then this will be decided in court and perhaps in negotiation. But publicly, we cannot admit blame. So there are legal or regulatory constraints involved. Opposition by senior management. That would really go along, be another way of saying number one there, where management's conviction that the public is wrong. There is conflict between departments of what strategies to adopt. Within the organization, there's a disagreement about how to approach this situation, whether to be defensive or whether to be accommodative. Accommodative strategies tend to be the best in meeting the immediate crisis communication demands. Accommodative strategies negate conflict. Even if you think you're right, sometimes it's easier just, and this is separate from admitting to some legal liability. But if that is not an issue, we're not concerned about legal damages being involved. To admit that we made a mistake may be the thing that gets this thing over with, satisfies people who are unhappy, and then we can move on. So very often the accommodative strategy is best in meeting the immediate crisis communication demands. Accommodative strategies can help in repairing an organization's reputation and emphasize the image repair. I'll give you some examples. We talked about Tylenol in another conversation, in another outline and video. Tylenol was the victim in the 1980s of sabotage, where someone poisoned bottles of Tylenol. But Tylenol went to the accommodative position of taking all of its products off the shelves all over the world. And you can imagine the expense of that. But in order to make people feel better about the Tylenol brand, they did that. BP, British Petroleum, had the terrible oil well blowout in the Gulf of Mexico. They have gone to extensive trouble to try to show that they will never let that happen again. They've publicized that greatly, and so they went to extremes, not to extremes, but they were definitely very aggressive in making moves to show that we understand that we made a mistake, a very bad mistake, and we will not allow that to happen again. Houston Astros, more recently, had the sign stealing scandal involving video cameras, and the Astros were told to suspend their manager and their general manager for a year. They fired the general manager and the manager in that case, and some people still weren't satisfied with that, but they were attempting an accommodative strategy there to give people what they were demanding to try to put the crisis at an end. Not all successful crisis communication strategies are accommodative. There's an example in your textbook about Pepsi-Cola successfully using a defensive strategy, saying we are right, we are not the party to blame here. Pepsi-Cola successfully using a defensive strategy in responding to a hoax claiming foreign objects were found in cans of Pepsi. Someone claimed they found a syringe in a Pepsi. Well, Pepsi very quickly determined that this was a hoax. And rather than do what Tylenol did, in the case of Tylenol, it was not a hoax, though there was actual poisoning of Tylenol products. Pepsi, in this case, determined this was a hoax. This did not happen. And they successfully defended their company. Reputation management. Reputation is the track record of the organization in the public's mind. And if the organization has, for the most part, performed well and has provided a good service, has been dependable, then that is very, very valuable. And when that is lost or damaged, you want to get it back. There are three foundations of reputation. One is economic performance, just profit and loss and how profitable you have been. But there's also social responsiveness. And then the ability to deliver valuable outcomes to stakeholders, that you please people. What you do is pleasing to the people who are your customers, or in general, the people that you provide services to. Public relations especially enhances the latter two. Social responsiveness. There's not a lot public relations can do about your economic performance, profit and loss, but we can do a lot about social responsiveness. How do you relate to the outside world? And the ability to deliver what stakeholders perceive as valuable, desirable outcomes. Reputation audits monitor an organization's reputation. That's a thing where we can be proactive. Image restoration. Once something has happened to damage the reputation of an organization, it can take about 3 years for an organization to recover from a crisis that damages its reputation. That's a long time. Quickly disclosing the details of a scandal or corporate misstep should be management's number one strategy. Remember what Warren Buffett said? We discussed this in the previous outline and the previous video. Get it right, get it fast, get it out, get it over. And here's a short video. Actually, the video's longer than what I will show to you, but we'll look at the first minute or two of this video on reputation management.
Corporate reputation management is difficult for some people to really get their hands around because they think it's everything a company does. It really is, when you think about it, the way a company distinguishes itself from its competitors and from its peers. And the reason why we say competitors and peers is increasingly customers and others are looking at a company based upon an ideal. If somebody can lower their costs, why can't you? If somebody can speed lines in a bank, why can't you? So it's the way a company gets distinguished from others and from its competitors. Reputation management is really critical to most companies because really what it does is it helps you manage your financial needs against all the other stakeholders of the company. And what we've found is that companies with better reputations tend to do better financially. When there are downturns in the market, even though everyone may go down, companies with good reputations bounce back more quickly. They tend to recruit and keep the best people. They tend to lower their cost of capital. So there's some real bottom line implications for a CEO or others of why reputation is really important.
We'll pause that there. There's more to that, and I hope that you will watch the rest of that video. I think that'll be useful to you. Strategies used to recover reputation. Make the progress and recovery visible. So let people see. This is a good example. The BP example that I was giving you is a good example of this. BP has been very visible in the things that they have done to prevent that oil well blowout in the ocean, where they were drilling for oil in the ocean to prevent that from happening again. Now, this making progress and recovery visible, this would apply to everything else that we're talking about here. Analyze what went wrong. Well, BP did that. Improve the governance structure. In other words, put safeguards in place that would prevent whatever bad thing happened from happening again. Make leadership accessible to the media. So you put your leadership people out front, have them answer questions, prepare them well to answer difficult questions, but show that they are accessible and they are taking responsibility. Fire employees involved in the problem. We talked about the Houston Astros sign stealing problem, and that they fired the manager, they fired the general manager, even though they were not required to do that. Commit to high corporate citizenship standards. This goes along with the rest of what's been discussed here. Carefully review ethics policies. Hire outside auditors for internal audits. Some or all of these may be applicable. Some of these may not be applicable in a certain situation. Issue an apology from the CEO. And that was done in the Astros case and in the BP case. So, again, all of these need to be very visible and seen by the public. Restoring reputation depends on the perceptions of the public, which is why we are visible in what we do, and other stakeholders. So do they find the explanation credible? If there's an explanation of why did this happen, was this an accident or was this carelessness? If it was carelessness, then that's a tough story to tell. But do they find the explanation credible, believable? Do they believe the organization is telling the truth? That's believable. And really credible is another way of saying that, I think. But do they believe the organization is telling the truth? So it's important to tell the truth, because we have a way, we being just people in general, the public has a way of determining that it is not being told the truth, which makes the problem far worse when that happens. Do they think the organization is acting in the public interest? So again, I think Tylenol could be seen to be acting in the public interest. They went to great expense to take all the Tylenol products off the shelves. BP has gone to great expense in its operations to prevent another oil well blowout. So those are, again, good examples of the organization being seen to act in the public interest. So that concludes this discussion of conflict management and crisis communications, crisis management. This is a very important subject. You could spend years on this subject, and we probably will have some further discussion of it at some point. Thanks.